When Disney opened up Animal Kingdom in 1998, they weren't doing anything new. Zoos were already a thing. Theme parks were already a thing. Meshing the two together was already a thing. Busch Gardens was a perfect example of that, and that opened up in 1959. Still, Animal Kingdom was sure to stand out above the rest. I mean, this was Disney we were talking about. Not just that, but Disney in the 90s, when the brand Disney carried weight that it doesn't quite carry in the same way today. That being the case, people would still visit this new park, but Disney had a problem: perception. See, even after the park opened, people still felt like this was a zoo. And while that may have been true in a number of ways, Disney wanted to shake free of that perception. So in the early 2000s, they released this advertising campaign that many, to this day, think is just so bizarre, but honestly, I think it's kind of genius. It was a made-up word, a slogan that sounded good, sounded interesting, and communicated a clear message. They said this phrase, this word, this made-up word, almost exclusively in an ad they ran in the early 2000s.
Disney's Animal Kingdom, it's many, many things, but remember, it's not a zoo!
And I'll tell you what, if you didn't know that Disney's Animal Kingdom was not a zoo before, you certainly learned it pretty quick during the time when they were running this TV ad. Now look, I'm sure that some of you are wondering, hold on a second, I saw the title of this video. What the heck does this have to do with the Galactic Star Cruiser? Great question. Much like Disney's Animal Kingdom, the Galactic Star Cruiser, it presented Disney with a problem. And that problem was perception. From the moment it was announced, the property or the experience that would ultimately become the Galactic Star Cruiser was almost exclusively described in only one way: the Star Wars Hotel. And that right there, that would be the thing. Because so many people kept repeating the same string of words over and over again, the perception of this new thing that we were getting started solidifying in people's minds. What was this new thing? A hotel. And of course, things got a little dicey when we started talking numbers, when pricing for this new hotel, in air quotes, was released. How much was it going to cost? $2,500 a night. Where do they get off charging $2,500 a night for a hotel? Now, I'm sure if you were paying attention when all of this chatter was happening, you remember hearing discussions about this. People being really excited for this thing and then finding themselves very disappointed when they heard the price point. Other people completely outraged at what it was going to cost for this hotel. But here's the thing. This wasn't just a hotel. It was a 2-night, 3-day experience that was much more similar to a cruise than your standard accommodation. Now, let me be clear about something real quick before we go any further. I'm not here to debate whether or not a voyage on the Galactic Star Cruiser was affordable or accessible in terms of price. Both of those things are subjective, and quite frankly, I know some people aren't going to like my stance on this, but not everything is going to be, nor should it be, accessible to everyone. Financially speaking, of course. Some things, some experiences, they're going to be outside your price range, and that's okay. In fact, the Galactic Star Cruiser, it was outside of our price range at the time, which is why we never got a chance to experience it. And look, we could have a long-winded discussion on price point alone, but I'm not interested in that. What I'm more interested in, the reason that we're having this discussion today, is perception. And more so, something I find even more interesting than just perception of this experience alone, why there was no attempt to correct the perception of the general public once Disney realized that that perception was off. Why was there no not a zoo moment for the Galactic Star Cruiser? Now, theoretically, in the 2020s, it would have been much easier to rewrite the script than it would have been in the early 2000s. I mean, back in the early 2000s, you were kind of limited. You know, you had traditional media, TV, and print. The internet was, of course, a thing, but it wasn't the thing that it is today. But in the 2020s, I mean, we're working with a whole different sack of potatoes. With social media right there at all of our fingertips, in every one of our pockets, seemingly all day, every day, the reach and access to an audience is much different today than it would have been in the early 2000s. And that's just assuming we're talking only about Disney's official social media accounts. That reach grows exponentially when we talk about other influencers and content creators, even if we're just talking about people on Disney's media list. With that being the case, it seems like there was plenty of opportunity for Disney to grab this bull by the horns and force it to look at what it wanted it to see. But for whatever reason, they didn't go that route. And at least in my opinion, this is one of the reasons that the Galactic Star Cruiser had a very short lifespan. Honestly, I think it's probably one of the key reasons, one of the key factors in its downfall. Now, before we move on, I know there are some of you out there who are going to reference the price and say that, in your opinion, that's probably the key reason that the Galactic Star Cruiser was very short-lived. And I don't entirely disagree, but I would push back just slightly that it was less about the price point and more about not understanding what that price point was all about. What were you getting for that price? And that leads back to perception. But again, that's just my opinion. You're welcome to share yours in a comment down below. But anyway, back to discussing the why. Why didn't Disney correct the perception here? Why didn't they flip the script? Now, I don't know about you, but I wasn't in the room when any of this happened. I wasn't part of any of those discussions, and presumably you weren't either, so the only thing we could do is speculate. And that's kind of fun. So, let me share my thoughts with you. Now, I'm of the opinion that part of the problem is, unfortunately, that this wasn't a really great era for Disney. I mean, arguably, we're kind of still in that era, maybe coming out of it, but this was a moment. And during this time frame, there was, I don't know, could we call it a big shift in mindset? I mean, we did have this shift in leadership, and with that shift came a lot of problems that we're still working our way through today. But there definitely seemed to be this shift in mindset that made it seem like Disney really wasn't willing to put in real effort to certain things. And I personally think that shifting the perception of what the Galactic Star Cruiser was or would be, that probably fell into the column of, it'll be fine. And when you couple that with another problem that we're seeing here at Walt Disney World, I'm sure it's true elsewhere and in other parts of the company as well, Disney not fully understanding their fan base, I think there was probably this expectation that there would be more crossover than there actually is. Or I suppose I should say was. You know, it's almost like they were expecting a certain corner of Star Wars fandom to seamlessly cross over into Disney Parks fandom and Disney Parks fans to seamlessly cross over into a certain level of Star Wars fandom that might be true for some people, but I don't necessarily think that it's true in the way that Disney needed it to be in order to see a certain level of success with the Galactic Star Cruiser. And so rather than committing fully to Star Wars fans and checking off the necessary boxes in order to do that, or committing fully to Disney theme park fans who want certain types of vacation experiences and checking all the boxes that would have been required to fully commit to that, it's almost like they tried to settle on something in the middle, leaving way too many boxes unchecked on either side. And unfortunately, that middle ground, it's not really a great place to be when we're talking about certain types of things. For example, hardcore fans that are willing to invest thousands in experiences centered around that fandom. It better be perfect, or they're not going to invest. On the flip side, if it's too rigid, someone who's not a hardcore fan, they're not going to want to invest either. And I feel like that's what happened with the Galactic Star Cruiser. Disney just struggled to commit to the bit. Now look, there are a number of ways, at least in my opinion, that Disney could have gone all in on the Galactic Star Cruiser. And quite frankly, the more I think about it, I feel like they could have absolutely gotten the best of both worlds. On one hand, they could have leaned all the way in to hardcore Star Wars fans, making this an experience that put them into the story, into the Star Wars universe in a way that they've never been able to experience before. On the other hand, they could have said, you know what, you hardcore Star Wars fans, we love you, we appreciate you, but we know that you're not interested in this. And they could have leaned all the way into the theme park fans, the people who know that Disney is going to give them a unique experience, but they have no idea who these characters are, and it doesn't matter because they're going to spend a couple days in space. I think that could have really been a fun experience for all, even maybe some of those hardcore hardcore Star Wars fans who also like theme parks, while also being a little less rigid. You know, not just appealing to people who already know the story. But there's a third option that I think would have been pretty awesome. We're not committed to the Star Wars fans, we're not committed to the Disney Parks fans alone, we're committed to what this park is. This is Hollywood Studios. Hear me out for a second. What if the Galactic Star Cruiser was an immersive experience, but you were an extra on the set? Yes, we're eating, we're drinking, we're completing tasks, we're doing all that stuff, but rather than being in the context of actually being somewhere in space in the Star Wars universe, why not on an elaborate set? Think for a second. Rey is battling Kylo Ren in that like iconic moment in the voyage that you take on the Galactic Star Cruiser, or you used to take on the Galactic Star Cruiser. And in a way that's very similar to what we see with Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular. We hear the director say action, we hear the director say cut. They tell us when we're supposed to cheer and who we're supposed to cheer for. I think that that could have been really cool. And again, I think it would have appealed to not only Star Wars fans, but also theme park fans, or just people who want to have a unique experience, movie fans. And if they would have stayed with the same format, where these voyages are a couple days long, they could have honestly done each of these independently, offering something like a red voyage, a green voyage, a gold voyage, and they could all happen on different dates, which is what was happening anyway. You could just select which one was right for you and your family. What experience do you want to have? Anyway, at the end of the day, the Galactic Star Cruiser is now history. And it really is too bad, especially because they went through all the trouble of making this hotel. Which leads me to another question that I want to touch on briefly. Some of you guys have asked my thoughts on this. And that is, why not open up this hotel as a standard hotel as opposed to close it down or, you know, redo it so that it's offices for Imagineers? I think the long and short of it is, well, there are probably a few different answers, right? Taxes and losses and all that business mumbo jumbo. I think that that probably drove the decision to make these office spaces as opposed to turn it into a hotel. But in my opinion, there was also something else driving this decision, and that was perception. I think, and again, this is just me speculating, I think that the perception of what this thing was so far off the trail that there was no good way to correct it. And sometimes you have to let the memory completely fade away before you can jump in again. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is what Disney does. If they use this building for Imagineers for the next 5-10 years, and then they turn it into something similar again, maybe something that is by the night as opposed to something like the Galactic Star Cruiser was, where you're going on a voyage. Now, doesn't that suck? Yeah, I would have loved to go check that place out. I would have loved to experience that, even as someone who's not a huge Star Wars fan. I still think that this was a unique experience that probably was ahead of its time. But sometimes, as a business, and Disney is no exception to this, you have to cut your losses. And I think that that's what happened with the Galactic Star Cruiser. It ultimately went too far off the rails to be corrected, and sometimes the best thing to do is let it be. But look, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know we've gone on and on about so many things today. What do you think? Did you get a chance to experience the Galactic Star Cruiser? Let me know your thoughts in a comment down below. Where do you think Disney went wrong, if you think they went wrong at all? I'd love to hear what you have to say. But for now, I'm off. Thanks so much for hanging out, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Until then, bye.